start with flipping my page here and calling for, well, we have a nomination, don't we?
I'd like to nominate Director Jackman.
Will you accept?
I would stand, yes, thanks.
Thank you. And I know I nominated you as well. So we have 2 nominations for Director Jackman. Are there further nominations from the floor? And calling for a third time? Seeing none, I declare Director Jackman the chair of the Rural Affairs Committee for 2023.
Thanks, Gary.
And is it a 30-minute speech?
Good luck.
Yeah, your version of 2 minutes.
For the gallery, we our procedures, we say we speak for 2 minutes and then let someone else speak. So anyway, thanks for your continued support. That's, I need a half a second to make sure this thing is connected.
And thanks for continuing.
And she actually calls us to order, so we can move on to item 4 on the agenda. Is the traditional lands acknowledgement. We acknowledge and respect the Indigenous peoples within whose traditional lands we're meeting today. We have adoption of agenda, and also I'd like to recognize visitors, and I haven't had a chance to check online. So first, maybe I'll call for adoption of the agenda as circulated. Move Tierney, seconded Newell.
Oh, sorry.
That's it's $2.
Yeah.
Any last minute changes from staff's on perspective? Everything's good on it. So seeing no changes, all in favor of adopting as circulated. Any opposed? That is carried. Freedom of the floor. We have Director Main with us again. Do we have any other municipal directors? I mean, alternate director Schmink, of course, is automatically part of the committee in the office of the director. Are there any other municipal directors online? I haven't. Okay, so moving freedom of the floor for Director Main, Newell, seconded Tierney, all in favor. So again, welcome, thank you. We do view you as part of our rural family.
Thank you.
Having a pretty rural population in Silverton.
And I appreciate and enjoy attending these meetings. They've been very educational for me.
Good. So receipt of minutes, they of course went to board. We haven't had any corrections since then, so that is good. Delegations. Now the draft usually says no delegations. We have 3 delegations and 4 items. So Christine kind of went over this, but about the only way to do this is we just go through items 8-1 through to the end. We don't try and change the order of any of it. So we have Jeremy, Richard, and Susan Cormack now for items 8-1 and 8-2. Susan Cormack is online, but you weren't able to get audio confirmation.
That's correct.
And nobody in the room representing those
Can you
2
hear me now?
issues.
Oh, there she is. Yeah.
You're very quiet. Can you adjust your volume a little bit?
Always very quiet.
Okay, so and just to then check the others, we also have delegations in the room for 8.3, John Pritchard and Ryan Richmond, and we have a delegation in the room for item 8.5.
That'll be Pritchard.
Okay,
Yeah, online. Yeah.
Pritchard is online as well.
8-4.
For 8.3, John Pritchard is online.
Yeah, the last number 90.
90.
And then we've got Ryan Richmond as well.
And Ryan Richmond as well. And then we have a delegation in the room for item 8.5, Naomi Aroni is in the room, thank you. And so if we missed anybody who's here as a delegation for another item.
8-4.
8.4 Matt's. 8.4. Okay, so what we'll do is as we go through business items, we'll start with 8.1. We'll follow the same process for all of them. So 8.1. Either Susan Cormack or Jeremy Richard, if you wanted to unmute. We allocate, delegated by the board, we allocate 15 minutes to listen to any additional information you may have that would clarify your application or your issues. We ask that you leave time within that 15 minutes for committee members to ask you questions. So it's really intended to focus between the applicant or the person with the item on the agenda and the committee. You'll find from time to time, we'll ask questions of staff for clarification in between. Once we get to the end of that question and answer or period of additional information, we ask the delegation to either physically step back from the board table or to mute themselves. And then while we discuss the actual business item, we won't ask for or entertain any additional input from the applicant because you are not a member of the committee or you're not a board member with freedom of the floor. So make sure you say everything you need to say during that first part. Once in a while for clarification, we have backtracked, but that is not preferable. So on item 8.1, this is a building bylaw contravention. Richard is the property owner. This is in electoral area of G. We do have a bit of a summary from building manager McIntyre. Amanda's given us sort of a historical note on this item. Technically, we should do them one at a time. So I guess if the Amanda, let's ask very first. Any updates from staff's perspective since you submitted the report?
Yeah, through the chair, I did have a meeting with Susan and Richard on Friday. It was an online meeting with them just to discuss the file and go over the process. The owner, Jeremy's the property owner and Susan is his representative. And due to the use of the buildings and the non-compliance with current zoning, we're recommending to move forward.
As per the agenda.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So what we'll do now is if whoever wants to speak to the item or both could unmute. If you want to give us any more information about your situation, please go ahead. So that would be Susan Cormack.
This is Jeremy Richard. Can you
Yes.
hear me?
Yes, and the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you for your time. So I just wanted to, I guess, update you guys on this self-directed process. I have applied for, I thought, all the permits that I needed. And I guess there's one with the zoning issue. I've also brought in an engineer to finish up a report on everything on the property, and I'm just waiting on a report back. And I just still need some clarification, I guess, on a few zoning and bylaw things, but that's sort of where I'm at.
And then Ms. Cormack, did you have anything else you wanted to add as new information?
I think Jeremy is going to speak to the situation himself.
You're very quiet. If you're able to speak closer to the mic, but what I heard you say is that it'll be Jeremy speaking on behalf of the recommendation. So that was fairly straightforward, I guess. Some questions for staff still, it sounds like, from the applicant or from the landowner. Do committee members have questions for the delegation? Or clarification for staff? Chair Watson.
Yeah, thank you. Through to the delegation, if I heard you correctly, because I'm sorry, the sound was a little low, and to Amanda as well, whichever. Amanda had met with you, I believe, just in the last few days and had indicated what was outstanding. So did that provide the information to you regarding the outstanding elements, or are you still unsure of what you need to do?
I think that we are.
I'm still waiting on some clarification. Yes, thanks.
Supplement.
Further? Yes.
Are you able to elaborate on the pieces you're waiting for clarification on?
I'm not in zoning and bylaws, so the legal exact language is complicated for me, but I think there's a few things that might be being misinterpreted, or the actual interpretation of the language. might clarify any problems we might have, as I spoke to Amanda about last week.
So we have a few options in general, and I guess everyone who's here with an item on the agenda is in the same position. We can accept the staff recommendation. What I've heard is that there have been meetings and process and discussions, and staff recommendation, which I heard 5 minutes ago, is still to proceed with the notice on title. We can refer this to a future meeting, and if we're going to refer it prior to making a motion to refer, I think the committee will probably have more questions for staff, similar to what Board Chair Watson just brought up, like what are the pinch points here? Or we can make some other recommendation, such as no further action is occasionally used. So I guess just sort of as a last thing here, I heard one committee member asking if there's anything specific you can inform this committee with that would impact which one of those paths we may choose once we ask you to step back and we deal with the recommendation. So if there were specifics that you felt you needed time to go back and forth with staff, I guess that might help.
Correct. I do have some questions regarding the minimum 1 hectare zoning. And it looks like in your paperwork, there is an allowance for being 0.2 of a hectare undersized for 2 dwelling units in the Area G R2 zoning paperwork. Yet when I spoke with Zach at zoning the last time, he said it was fine, and then he contradicted everything he said the next day in our last email. I'd like to keep working through this process, and if we can avoid putting something on my title, that would be great. It's just about finding a way to communicate a solution.
Okay, so I have another committee member, and we might have a bigger speakers list here in a minute. Director Vandenberg, question for the landowner or around or processor staff. Go ahead.
Right, thank you through the chair. Question is to the applicant. You had mentioned, you had referred to getting some engineering, waiting on some engineering come back. What is the nature of that engineering that you're waiting on?
I had a full structural assessment of all the buildings that have permits out, and I'm just waiting on the final report as we speak.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions for the landowner? This time, seeing none, thanks very much for, oh, sorry, Director Cunningham.
Oh, thank you, Chair. Through the chair, 2 questions. Could you give us the name of the engineer? And the second question is, are either of those buildings occupied at this time?
My engineer is WSA Engineering out of Castlegar, and I can send you the correct spelling for the fellow's name because I will probably say it wrong. And 2, I have someone looking after my property while I'm out of the country. Yes.
Someone looking after who's the occupant of one of the dwellings, to clarify?
I don't know the legal language that you guys are trying to use, so I'm gonna be mute, I guess.
Further, Director Cunningham?
No, that's it.
Okay, any other questions for the delegation?
No,
Okay, so-
I'd like to just hopefully work together with you to find a resolution to these issues.
Okay, thank you for making the connection and providing your input. So what we'll do now is ask you to mute, and Ms. Cormack as well to mute, and the committee will turn to staff for any other additional clarification questions or to make a recommendation. So the floor is open. Director Cunningham, do you want to make a recommendation or do you have any further questions? for staff.
No, I know the subject quite well. And I'd like to suggest that, in light of the fact that the, proponent is exploring the avenues, I'd certainly like to give him the chance to do that. I would say that if he is waiting, I would suggest that waiting 1 month would be fine, and I'd like to refer this to the next month.
Do we have a second for motion to refer? Seconded. So, yeah, just on propriety of referral to the next rural committee meeting,
Yes.
which will be a month and change, the way the calendar works. So that's what we're considering without any further debate on that.
Yeah, but there are two,
Well-
as you know.
Well, we shouldn't direct her on referral. Maybe you can make a closing comment.
Well, no, the thing is, 8-2 and,
Yep.
8-1 are the two buildings same product thing, so I was going to suggest.
Well, but can we do that after?
Referrals, okay.
Because we have one recommendation.
Fair
And the landowner may have something different to say on the second one, I'm thinking, even though they're parallel. So on referral, all in favor? Any opposed? Don't seem, so that is carried, that is referred to the January Rural Affairs. So 8.2, and you're quite correct,
Yeah.
Director Cunningham, and wasn't sure exactly how to do this because they are separate recommendations and separate issues that they go on title. One may be removed and the other might not be, but I'm going to reopen it on this second one to either Mr. Richard or Ms. Cormack. Anything else to add? This is with respect to the second building bylaw contravention recommendation from staff. So this would be a second notice on title. At this time, did you have anything as a delegation to speak to on item 8.2?
Excuse me, sorry, I didn't realize there was a second notice on title. This is the first I'm aware of it, actually. Yeah, that's what I'd like to say. I'd like to get the information regarding it as soon as possible, please.
Okay, can I ask staff quickly, normally you send information on the file, these would have been separate letters or separate letters from Mr. Morrison, corporate officer, individually stating there's this issue and proposed notice on title and what that form would look like. And then I see in our agenda a second letter from Mr. Morrison indicating here's where you're at, this would look like. And then had you spoken to the landowner individually about the two issues?
Through the chair, there was two separate letters, two separate reports that were created, so they were provided to the owner. We did discuss the buildings in several emails, so yeah, this is the first that I've heard that. I didn't realize that you didn't know that there was two separate buildings.
Okay, so back to Mr. Richard, your concern's been noted by the committee. Any additional information on this second one? So the first one was the reno,
Maybe,
this one is,
like, excuse me, sorry.
go ahead, go ahead.
Again, I think we're having a lot of misunderstandings due to the fact that I have multiple building permits out. And I think if we were to be able to communicate, maybe not on the public square, and clarify some of the stuff, I think we could have a lot of clearer understanding of what's going on. And maybe we could do this next month at the next meeting and hopefully progress outside of here, because I'm confused and really, I didn't realize it was two different marks on my title. I'm out of the country. Thank you.
Understood. And so that's why actually I'm kind of glad that we dealt with these independently and brought that to surface. And of course, there is a path to give more time, and that would be referral. So thank you for your input as a delegation on the second one. So that now going back to our internal conversation, I'll throw it back to Director Cunningham on 8.2.
Yeah,
Referred to January rank and same reasons.
Yeah.
Maybe this one a little more clarity required. So a second on referral. Weatherhead, thank you. So all in favor of referral of 8.2? Thanks very much. So we will see that in a month and change.
Just have a question.
Sure, Chair Watson.
Yeah, I just want to verify because both the reports that are in our agenda, I'm assuming went to the applicant and they both outlined both the different permits and the timing of every communication. So I just want to clarify that. I see Amanda nodding yes. So when I read this, it says there's been lots of communication.
Yeah.
And they've received that, both these reports, which will identify as per building. Okay, thank you, Amanda. Thank you.
Okay,
Could I speak to that?
so we will move to 8.3. This is a development variance permit application. Pritchard, this is electoral area B. So John Pritchard is, or Ryan Richmond are representatives for this. Sadie, yes, I guess first the Coles notes on where we're at with this application, and then we'll go to delegate.
Yeah, so this application is a development variance permit for a property out in electoral area B near Yad.
Sorry, 1 second.
Yeah.
Sorry, Director Cunningham? Director Cunningham, it interferes sound if you're having a sidebar. You guys could go in the hallway if you'd like. Thank you. Sorry,
Perfect.
I couldn't hear you.
So the applicant is requesting to vary the requirements of the RDCK subdivision and servicing bylaw. So as not to provide proof of water for 5 lots and not to demonstrate septic capacity for 1 lot in order to facilitate a 6-lot subdivision. This application represents a significant departure from the intent for regulation, best practice, past practice, and there's nothing unique about this proposal which would justify the variance. Because this proposal would shift the costs and risk of development to future owners and could result in the creation of lots that are both unserviceable and undevelopable, staff are recommending that the board not approve this application.
Okay, thank you. So, representing the application, we have either John Pritchard or Ryan Richmond wanting to speak to this.
Yeah, I can speak to, thank you, everyone. Just to kind of a little bit of background, I guess first here is, I think where this stems from in some level is that basically being near the edge of the regional district boundaries, if this were essentially 20 kilometers up the highway, a variance like this is, I wouldn't say, but it's not unheard of, and it's kind of happens in the East Kootenay Regional District, and that's kind of where some of the basis comes from. The second big aspect, I think that it has been addressed in the report. It wasn't really addressed in the advisory planning meeting. Is that there's kind of 2 very different questions at play here. One being the wells themselves on the highway fronting proposed parcels, and the second question is being the need to prove both the water and septic on the larger kind of remainder parcel on the east side. That area is abuts other title holdings that the Pritchards have. We've discussed the original application with the provincial approving officer and discussed different ways to actually access that portion of this property. And what was recommended from Cliff Razzo, who's the approving officer, is that section be accessed by easement only over other lands that the Pritchards own. The property as a whole also has archaeological considerations, and I think without getting too deep, and I'm not sure how much I'm actually legally allowed to say under the Heritage Conservation Act, but essentially I think it comes down to that even drilling a well on that remainder portion is going to be incredibly difficult. So I think that's the big kind of concern with the report and with the previous discussions is that there's kind of no differentiation between one side and the other, and I mean take some fault for kind of having that all included in the same application, but At the same time, I think even Interior Health addressed that rear portion and said that they have no concerns that way. Yeah, I think that kind of sums up where we're at with it. As far as the recommendation, as far as what the board here should do, taking a legal opinion that seems reasonable enough. I don't think that's going to be an issue, and I think that from what we've seen in other jurisdictions, that opinion is not going to prohibit this from happening. But that said, I don't think it's a problem to go out and get an opinion like that. I think that's totally reasonable. So yeah, I think that kind of sums up where things are at with the application in general. That the water requirements on the frontage lots, fronting Highway 95. I think it kind of come to terms that if that's the way the regional district policies and kind of precedent are all at, then that's one thing. But the other rear portion of the parcel, if that could be considered separately, it would be beneficial.
Okay, thank you for your input. One thing I'll note, or I was saying we did it by text or something, Sadie, I know we have a podium in the corner now, but if you can sit at the table. It's just this remote microphone system has a limited distance. Thanks. So from the committee, any questions for the applicant, Director Vandenberg? Go ahead, please.
Thank you through the chair to the question to the applicant. My questions are around access. So on the Highway 95 access, there's a number of them in a spacing. But I don't see in the report, and maybe I missed it, any comments from the Ministry of Transportation in terms of having that density of access off of Highway 95. And then my other access question is Lot 6. I didn't understand what you had said or suggested. How do you access Lot 6?
Yeah, thanks for the question. So, as far as Lot 6, that would be accessed via easement. So essentially, it would be a path coming from the north and east side over other land that the Pritchards own. So if you kind of were to zoom out an extra level, the Pritchards own multiple titles directly to the east and to the north. So there are some existing legal road accesses to a certain point to their property, and so legal access to one lot is allowed via easement. So it would be kind of a case where a driver would kind of be roughed in to access that and legally established via easement, and that was discussed with the approving officer. As far as the highway frontage of the lots, it's still currently in discussion with the ministry, but essentially what they have suggested based off the original application is that they would allow 2 accesses off of the highway. And basically how those 2 access points off the highway access each of the lots will to be determined, likely some sort of easements of structuring shared driveway connections or split driveways, so that that 2 driveways can kind of both essentially connect to the same point and access the highway off the same point.
Further, Director.
Supplemental, if I may. So the conversation with Modi is still ongoing and somewhat preliminary. What you're saying is 2 accesses, but I don't know how. So would then a feeder road running parallel to 95, would that be a solution to that? Because in order for you to access 5 properties, you'll need more than 2 accesses. So I'm just wondering to what extent your conversation has gone.
Yeah, it's that's a possibility, a suggestion. Exactly how it's structured, like if that's a smaller section is probably kind of the most beneficial. Essentially, we've been waiting for correspondence from the ministry on that topic, and the last we heard from them was basically them waiting for resolution of this application. So it was kind of putting one in front of the other. We're kind of in a bit of a feedback loop of one thing's waiting for the other. Your question kind of goes back to them waiting for us to go through this process. So
I will note, Mr. Richmond, that the document we're looking at shows 3 proposed driveway access points. Because
yes,
it's,
so
yeah.
to clarify that, there's one existing point that essentially accesses the property now, and then they've kind of said that they want 2 access points or would be willing to approve 2 access points. So I think it might be a scale thing on the kind of drawing they're looking at. One saying that that's an existing approach, and 2 proposed kind of connection points.
Understood. I do see now, yeah, existing approach and then 2 proposed driveways, but a total of 3. Thank you. So speakers list, I have Watson next, please.
Thank you. Through to the applicant, Brian Richmond. I'm just curious, so you're requesting that we waive the proof of water and septic. How will you provide those if that is not determined before subdivision? Because that makes a lot not developable if you don't have those. That's my first question. The second one is, you have floodplain restrictions that are pretty strict in that area. How do you anticipate developing areas that are in a floodplain that do have a high risk?
Yeah, so basically essentially in kind of comparing everything to the East Kootenay Regional District, that's where I'm based, and I'm sitting in Cranbrook, where we see, and in cases similar or kind of the same process where it goes through a development variance permit, the common catch point is essentially to put a covenant on title that limits the availability of occupancy or building permit until that water and septic is proven or the servicing is proven. So that's the kind of typical or what we've seen, basically protection, if that makes sense. And then sorry, and in answering that question, I kind of spaced on it. Can you repeat your second question there?
Sure. So the property already does have a covenant on it indicating you have restrictions which speak to the hazards.
Right.
And just to note that when you defer the servicing requirements post subdivision and you require a covenant, that requires civil court to enforce. We're not able to enforce that. So it's a much less reliable mechanism when it comes to someone purchasing a property to develop. So I'm just curious how that lands with you, and that it actually makes it more difficult. If you can't prove it now, you shouldn't be developing them. Covenants are court enforced, not local government enforced.
Or voluntary.
Or voluntary, yeah.
Voluntary covenant placed on your property.
Right. No, that's a fair point. And then, yeah, I think you spoke to flood hazard, and that's in the covenant that affects this property as it's kind of set up now. The flood hazard isn't really a factor. The kind of main consideration is rock slide. So yeah, I don't really I can't really argue what you're saying, if that makes sense. Yeah.
No, thank you for that input. I don't see any other questions, just going back to online. Oh, I'm sorry, Director Newell, please go ahead.
Thank you. I'm just thanks for this discussion, because I was struggling with understanding this. I didn't quite hear why you can't prove water on the 5 lots, like why you wouldn't do it now as part of the process.
Yeah, no, fair enough. And I think that one it is primarily financial based for the Pritchards, and kind of have taken recommendation, that comment. We've over the last couple of days, we just got the report actually on last Thursday, so I've been discussing it with them, even though it was dated kind of 2 weeks prior, but it's a separate issue. Yeah, I think that recommendation, it's kind of a case where those fronting lots, I think they kind of come to terms with the idea of likely kind of parsing this into smaller sections so that drill in one more additional well and kind of do it as singular lot at a time, or kind of in a couple phases rather than the way that it's presented here now. But like I say, there's kind of the secondary issue or kind of separate issue of that remainder section and how could you actually access it, actually drill a well with the archaeological considerations. So yeah, that's kind of where I think the focus could and should be.
Further, Director Newell?
No, thank you.
Okay, so checking again on chat, I don't see any other hands up for questions, so thank you very much, Mr. Richmond. If you would please mute now, and we will go into our conversation as a committee with the recommendations. I just want to ask Sadie right off the top, clarification, of course, like I said earlier, we can move and debate the staff recommendation. This currently does not approve the issuance of the development variance permit. We can refer this if we think there's something else to be learned via the best process, or we can do something else. If we vote not approve, to Sadie, is there a restriction on the landowner to come back immediately or any particular time frame with an alternative application, say a different density, that kind of thing? Do we have to wait any period of time if we do not approve this? What are the rules around that? That I maybe know, but not certain.
Yeah, through the chair. I believe the local government act specifies that you can't come back with the exact same application within 6 months, but don't quote me on that. There is a prohibition against, people just coming back with the exact same thing. If they wanted to come back with a revised proposal, I believe we could consider that straight away.
With a different density or numbers of lots, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and in speaking with the applicant prior to this meeting, once they received the staff report, I was able to clarify with them a more conventional approach in the RDCK, which is what Ryan brought up, the applicant brought up, which is doing a phase subdivision. So rather than doing 6 lots at one time, they can basically revise their proposal with Modi, they would just want to do 2 lots. And then they only are doing the financial investment on those 2 lots rather than the full thing. And then they use the funds that they receive from that to do the following subdivisions in the future.
So to clarify, that would be fair game to come right back and wouldn't impact them in terms of time. But if they came back with the same subdivision plan and said, we're going to tweak one thing, we might be prohibited from receiving or reviewing that for a period of time, or I don't know if Nelson would know that.
I'm right.
Correct.
I'm right.
Okay, because I think it's important to the committee, because if we go a path of not approve, it may be gone for a long time. If we go a path of referral, there may be tweaking. If we go a path totally different, it's up to the committee, of course. I see Director Vandenberg, your hand there. Questions for the committee,
Right.
or our staff rather, or did you want to move recommendations?
Excuse me, to staff. I think the project looks rather interesting. I certainly don't want to dismay the applicant for the work, but I do have some clarity questions around the services. And the phase approach perhaps addresses some of that. But again, the other thing is access. And until we understand, the Highway 95 is a busy corridor. And until we understand Ministry of Transportation's point of view on that, I think it behooves us to better understand that. And then an agreement on lot 6. Now maybe the plan will change, but there's got to be some sort of an agreement in sorts. How are you going to access lot 6? There's got to be some correspondence or some agreement that needs to be drawn up. I think in my mind that I'd like to see to satisfy the opportunity for lot 6. So access is a big part for me, confirmation on thereof, and then a question on services as well. And another thing that came up was floodplain. Director Watson had brought up. I'm looking over the mapping and whatnot, and I don't see what that might be. So I guess I'll just leave that up in the air for now. Thank you.
Sorry, I apologize for the sidebar. It might have been a non-standard flood erosion risk or hazard area, which could be several things. Sadie, I don't know if you know that, and the other question on Modi, if we could do an approval subject to Modi clarifying or some agreement on access, et cetera.
Yeah, through the chair, regarding those questions, so in respect to the first one on access, the RDCP subdivision bylaw is quite silent on that. We've essentially said, we're gonna leave that to Modi to decide. It's important, but I think there's just different ways that it can be approached, as the applicant noted. Sometimes Modi allows easements through other properties, sometimes they say, you know, you could maybe do that 6, but 2 properties are gonna have to share an access. Sometimes folks do common access lots. But ultimately we leave that up to Modi to do that decision. And in terms of, how lot 6 specifically would be accessed, again, there's sort of a lot of considerations for that lot, both hazard, archaeological, and it's a question whether it could be really ever developed at all. You know, and even putting in of an access road on that property could be a problem. And that sort of circles back to one of the issues, which is, you know, lots 1 through 5 are different than what's happening on lot 6. But the creation of lot 6, even if the current owner doesn't have any intention to develop it, what happens when it changes hands? And what happens if someone is less considerate of the covenants that are on title? And speaking of the covenants, to answer the third question, floodplain requirements. If you look on the site plan, which is on page 7 of this report, you can kind of see Ryan Richmond, who's a surveyor, did a very nice job of sort of outlining the dashed line here, how the lots 1 through 5 are affected. So as you can see, like the western portion of those lots are where the developable areas, like the areas that are identified as safe to develop are. So that sort of cuts most of the lots in half and leaves about, depending on each, 1 or a half a hectare of developable lot area. Do you have any questions?
Yep, thank you. Further, Director Vandenberg.
No, thank you.
Watson?
Yeah, I just wanted to, I think Sadie answered it, but the covenant is registered on title restricting building on the parcel due to hazards associated with rock falls, flood, and alluvial fans. And it's in the proposed subdivision plans, what has been included in the planning as Sadie indicated. What I wanted to also mention is that in my experience in rural areas where you get subdivisions approved based on private access, that private access is very subjective to who owns the property, and there is very little mechanism to enforce access. I've had people who buy properties, develop them, and then they're restricted by the people who originally developed it to even access it if they're not on title, such as family members. And that's something that I'm so sorry I've encountered, but it unfortunately really puts a lot more pressure on ensuring your access is legitimately accessible, because Modi will not make it a public road. You rely on the person who developed it to maintain it and give you access, which is just really vulnerable. And so I do have a lot more consideration when it comes to access through private areas, because there's just a lot of subjectivity to who owns that. I just wanted to give that as a premise as to why I'm really a lot more cautious about those.
Okay, and that's not so much a question or a statement.
Sorry.
I see, no, that's good,
Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, we're not debating the recommendation yet. You'll have to get there. Davidoff, Director Davidoff, I see you're in the chat. Please go ahead.
Yeah, and I just want to raise this now, like following up on what Chair Watson has said. We've seen a lot of that. And we used to have like prescriptive rights. There was a piece of legislation that gave you prescriptive rights, but that was repealed. So if you've crossed the property for a really long time, you could have prescriptive rights. But the other issue is that it's even water easements, because you have water lines running across, like I know we have that issue here. 43 properties, water lines running across everybody's property. Nobody has an easement. And I spoke with the water rights branch, and the manager said he had to reroute all his water lines around a property because the landowner wouldn't that he didn't have an easement wouldn't let him on the property to maintain his water lines, and said, well, you've got a right to go and force an easement through the court process. But the key thing is that I think we should start looking at not just water, but also easements, and not just access issues for water lines and things like that. So I'm just raising that right now. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Director. And if you go to the Interior Health, they've got a water map. It's amazing, including on my property, how many old water lines are still on record. And makes me nervous about somebody coming out of the woodwork. So, good conversation. We have a few more delegations to work through and other issues. No recommendation on the floor yet. Maybe put it to Director Tierney. Do you want to move a recommendation?
Thank you, Chair. I have a question for staff. I see the options here and the recommendation and some discussion around a phased approach. I don't see that as an option. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, through the chair, the phased option would be for, essentially what that would mean is the applicant would be complying with our regulations as they're written now. So it wouldn't require any special approval from you folks.
Further?
And further to the applicant representative, Ryan.
Oh, well, no, we're past there. Sorry, it would get mired here. We need to make a recommendation. I think the path to other options would be referral. I may be wrong, but I mean, I think that's where we're at in the conversation. We would move this to staff and the applicant if it leads us to return, or we will follow staff recommendation and we won't see it for 6 months unless it's completely different, in which case that's exactly what you're talking about anyway.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I'd like to move the motion that staff and applicant review a phased approach.
I don't think we can do that particularly. We can refer it, Sadie?
Yeah, I can provide the context. So if you're, just to clarify, you know, regardless of whether you went with option 1 or option 2, the applicant would still be able to go and pursue that phased approach. That won't affect. Referring it would be, we can keep continuing this application, but they can do the phased approach.
So the point is whether or not we continue with this application. The second option also refers to legal advice, which I think our staff understand our legal position right now. Further, Director Tierney, I don't know if you're ready with a recommendation, or would you permit, I've seen Director Vandenberg and Watson again. But we'll loop back to you shortly. Vandenberg, go ahead.
All right, thank you through the chair. I would like to move that we refer this I wonder if a month ought to do it. I'm looking at Sadie, perhaps some more time. I don't know, these are big issues, but they're certainly worth investigating and then coming back. Because I think the idea is a good one.
Sorry, Director Vandenberg, you've moved to refer it. We don't need an explanation. We won't be able to have one. It'll just
All
be
right, I
referral.
won't give it up.
However, I'm going to ask Director Tierney first. Would you second referral?
Yes.
Okay, so.
Till when?
Till, thank you, Chair.
That's what I was trying to determine, Chair.
Trying
to be fair.
So seconded on propriety of referral, what is a reasonable time frame to bring this back to the Rural Affairs Committee?
I mean, I can bring it back next month. I maybe just seek clarification on what you are looking for to be brought back. Like, is there, I know in the last referral you guys asked me was like to have a discussion to change this with that, but.
So the propriety of referral, I don't want to go too far down a rabbit hole here. I think it's pretty open-ended. So.
How about till
January,
when
February.
the applicant is ready to come back with a different proposal?
Well, thank you for that, but we should pick a date, and if they're not ready, then we will refer it again. We've had a few of these kick along like 6 months. So I'm maybe I'm relying on staff and knowing your workload, and there's quite a few options here. 1 month, 2 months, what would your initial thought be?
1 month is fine for me.
Initially, if we refer to January rack, if the mover and seconder are fair with that, we'll see where they get.
Sounds fair to me.
Okay. Thank you. So on referral to January rack, all in favor? Any opposed? And we were referring quite a bit of work for staff, but just remaining cognizant of that. Yes.
I wasn't clear on what information is required from us.
Okay. So this is on other options of how this application may look. That is the propriety of referral, I guess. To me, it's pretty wide open. What, please, Director Vandenberg, I cut you off earlier. Your thoughts on what we're trying to clarify between now and when it comes back?
Right, I think access, the conversation around access is quite important. For me,
That would become subject to, not our purview though, that's up to
Yeah.
Modi. This is unusual, conversation on referral, Chair Watson.
So it is unusual because generally the discussion would provide, and I think the two things that have been raised have been access, but that is a Modi approval thing, that is not ours. But the servicing is really the biggest consideration, and the covenant's already in place. So the applicant needs to review how are they going to achieve those things? Because I think this committee has said, we're not going to waive those. So how are you going to make a proposal that works? There was a suggestion that it's the first 2 lots, do those, and then work with the others and phase the approach. So it's exploring those options. And I apologize, it's just that access is not our approval, so we're not going to get much difference on that. That's
well,
only,
6 is.
Now,
not for access.
if we presumed we're not going to change some of the requirements, we would have done that by not approving, but we didn't do that. We referred. So I think referral, it will come back in January. We'll see what it looks like. Hopefully everyone will, Director Bernieri will be fully up to speed with the options, and we'll either have a path that this shape of a subdivision works or doesn't work for us. So we should move on to the next one. Well, we are
on propriety of referral, please.
we will try it. We are referred. It's referred, but go ahead.
Just a comment, we're referring to January over a holiday season here. So staff is aware, they're gonna be aware, so.
Yep. That's why I asked, and they're good. 8.4. Triple mirror. I hope that's correct. Oh, sorry. Nope. Move along here, sorry. Is that where I'm at?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I put my note in the wrong spot.
There you go.
Okay, electoral area F, we have Daniel, James, and Matthew Schuffelmeyer. We do not have a delegation for this? Or we do, sorry. Oh, sorry, Matt. Yes.
Good morning.
Absolutely. We
Stand
spoke.
there, stand here.
Okay, so, please take a seat and your voice will carry best to that owl, as we call it. Good morning. We'll open quickly with the Coles note, sort of where we're at from staff. Please go ahead.
Yeah, so this is a land use bylaw amendment application in electoral area F to rezone the subject property from suburban residential F to a site specific of the same zone. The only change that the applicant is making is to reduce the minimum lot size from 0.5 hectares to 0.4 hectares for the purposes of facilitating a 2-lot subdivision with on-site water and on-site sewage disposal systems. Given that the creation of lots less than 1 hectare with on-site servicing does not align with best practices for sustainable long-term development, staff are recommending that no further action be taken on this application.
Okay, thank you. And so, Matt, please go ahead. We've seen how it works here. Any information you want to add? Any questions you're able to answer? And then when we step back, we'll discuss the recommendation.
Yes.
The floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, directors, for taking the time to review this application and to listen to a meeting this morning. Also, thank you to Sadie and the RDCK planning staff for reviewing this. I can see a lot of consideration that has been put into it. My name is Matthew Schuffelmeyer. You'll notice there's a few other Schuffelmeyers on this property. Those are my parents. I'm from Manitoba. I've been in Nelson since 2017, and my brothers and family have all followed me to the Kootenays. So we're all here now. My brothers and I, in fact, are living in a house together. So it's been awesome getting here, and we plan to be here for a long time. This is an application to shrink the lot size so that we can essentially go ahead with the subdivision. And I've reviewed Mr. Zanko's report, and I understand the concerns. I've heard the directors speaking this morning, and really, we're concerned about access, water, and septic, as well as keeping the rural character of area as it is. And I want to start by discussing access because it's not a contentious point in this one. Access is, we have a 20-meter panhandle on this property, and we have more than enough capacity to have a 2-lane road. We're working with MOTI on that, and it doesn't look like it's going to be a hang-up. And so we get to the question of on-site servicing in the context of a smaller lot size. And I think that, by the end of this presentation, with the greatest respect to the RDCK planning staff, I'm going to ask that the board move to actually approve what I'm proposing here, or in the alternative that we refer it further along so that we can contemplate what I'm going to propose is something that could be considered if you're not convinced by the time I'm talking.
So to clarify the options, and if you read the report, first, this committee doesn't approve anything we recommend to the board, but if there's a next step, option 2 would be first and second reading and refer to a public hearing.
Yeah.
So there'd be no approval
Sorry.
whatsoever from this or tomorrow's meeting, but that is a potential path, is public hearing.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. And so the concern is long-term planning when I read the RDCK's, right? So the question is, in 100 years, 200 years, if we allow this lot to be shrunk, will we still have the ability to have on-site servicing? And will that on-site servicing lead to contamination is kind of where my mind went next. I didn't have the time to dig into the reasoning behind this policy within IHA, but I imagine that it is to do with making sure there's services and to making sure there's no contamination. So on the first point, ensuring that there's continued services on the lots, I want to start there. And if you've seen the report, you'll note that this property that we're talking about is kind of unique because although it's in Area F, it's actually right beside the 6 Mile Lakes mini storage facility. So it's not exactly the most rural type of aesthetic property. It's still beautiful up there. And it's a very flat lot. There's some, you have to go down the hill to access it. But once you get to the part where we're proposing to put the lots, it is actually flat and treed. And the reason I'm mentioning that the lot is flat is because it's the minimum lot size requirement is half a hectare. And by the time, if this subdivision were to occur, the lots would each be approximately 4.3 hectares. So we're talking about a fairly insignificant reduction of the lot sizes. In addition to that, there's also the fact that this lot is a panhandle lot. And so in truth, it's actually 1.2 hectares, if the laneway were taken into account. I understand why it's not taken into account, but the point I want to make with respect to this access and the lot being flat is that there are lots of spaces on this property to place septic systems. And you'll see in the report that we received from All Around Septic that there's certainly room for 2. But what I'm going to suggest to the board is that there's actually room for more. If you look at the map that was attached to Craig Saperkin's report, you'll see that he's placed 2 hypothetical septic areas, and you can see that there is in fact room for many more. And so it's my submission that in the event that there were some kind of issue with these septic systems, that there is space to put a new one. You know, in 250 years, if the first septic system and the second septic system have both failed for whatever reason, can we put septic in the lot still? And the answer I will suggest is yes. And so it's my submission that should help alleviate the concern, at least that I think is addressed by IHA's policy in that regard. If we had a 0.5 acre parcel that was, you know, half very steep cliff kind of topography, we could move forward with this subdivision, even if there were only room for, you know, 2 septic systems on that lot. So in this case, the policy is kind of running into the reality on the ground, which is that there is room for, you know, additional services to ensure that there is, you know, continued services for the spot. In addition to that, I want to talk a little bit about site contamination, because I'm assuming, again, this is part of what's underpinning the policy at IHA that's raising the concern in the RDCK. And I heard the director speak a few times about the challenges of enforcing easements, because that's done through civil courts. And I want to really highlight to the board that when we talk about site contamination, there are a number of tools available to a number of agencies to ensure that site contamination is stopped as soon as it is found, but also to ensure that the liability of remediation of sites does not fall upon the shoulders of the RDCK or decision makers such as yourselves. And those rules and tools for enforcement are found within the Environmental Management Act or the Water Sustainability Act or other various local government acts that you all have access to. In particular, the Environmental Management Act is a powerful tool that allows, you know, if anybody catches wind of contamination happening on a site, you can send an inspector out. That inspector can make a report that requires the contamination to be remediated immediately. This is all done outside of courts. And then the cost of that remediation will be placed back on the landowner if they don't do it themselves. So the legislation says, clean up your own lot. If you don't, the province can step in and clean it up and put the cost back onto the landowner, which can be, you know, enforced. That would then be enforced through the courts. But at that point, the environmental contamination that we're actually concerned about has been fixed. And so it's my submission that there's lots of tools available to make sure that any contamination that might occur is cleaned up. I also want to say there's no greater risk of contamination in this context than there is in any other lot with a septic system. And the other thing we need to worry about is whether there will be continued provision of water. The report notes that we have a community water system that runs actually right through the property. I've spoken to the person who runs that community water system, and they've told me because of the topography of where my lot sits, which is at the top of the hill or kind of halfway up, there's far less pressure there. And he has recommended that I do not connect to that system because of the lack of pressure. But in considering whether this would work or not, we've looked at the well site maps on the BC government websites, and we can see that there are lots of wells around the property, not immediately next to the property, but on the ones nearby. And we've also called a well drilling company and spoken to them and asked, hey, what do you think about this particular location? Do you think we can get good pressure wells drilled? And we've been given a very, very positive response. They tell us that because of the proximity to Duhamel Creek and the relatively high water table in the area, they said they've drilled wells there before, and those wells produce lots of water. And so on the basis of those statements, we are quite confident that we are able to provide water to the property. Now, these are really things to think about if we got to the subdivision stage. This is really about shrinking the lot size. But those statements I made about the presence of, or the sufficiency of the room on the lot, and the ability to remediate any contamination that might occur, as well as the presence of water, should, in my submission, satisfy the board that this is something that could go forward.
Okay, thank you. Again, we're a committee, not a board, committee of the board. Looking time-wise, we have some minutes for questions from the committee members for the applicant. Don't see anybody online on chat. Questions for the applicant? Watson, please go ahead.
Not necessarily a question, just an FYI. When it comes to actual enforcement of the acts you mentioned in terms of like the Environmental Management Act, little to none. Just from a bit of an unfortunate thing, you can read an act and assume we have those in place. I have several areas that we end up calling the RAP line because we're not getting any response on them. So just to note that they're not actually, as they're written, is not actually how they get carried out for most of our rural areas. They just don't have the staff to do it. So they're not mechanisms I would rely on in terms of what I would use to say, yeah, that sounds okay, because we've got that mechanism. So it's just more of an FYI for you that they're unfortunately in rural areas, a lot of things read great, they're not actually what occurs. So that's just more of a comment.
That's fine. I don't see any of our members online. Any committee members here? Questions for the applicant? We have everything we need to know. Thank you very much, then. Mr. Schoffelmeyer, if you return to the gallery, we will continue from there. Thank you. We have Director Newell, F here for the application. The floor is yours.
Thank you. I have a question to Stuart or Nelson or Sangeeta. So, never thought of this before, but if we go to 2 readings and a public hearing, what criteria can the board use to refuse 3rd reading? In other words, like with 2 readings, there's kind of an assumption, hey, we kind of like it, we'll just wait and see what happens at the public hearing. But are there other criteria we can use to, are there any criteria we can use to deny 3rd reading, just turn it down?
Who wants
Might be a bit of an obscure question, but
well, I don't know, through the chair, I don't know if it's an obscure question. I think it's a matter of operating in good faith. I think that if you're going to send it to a public hearing, then you're really looking at what the public's going to say about the application and use that feedback to make your decision when it comes back after that public hearing. If you're putting it to public hearing and then you're potentially looking to deny the application based on information you already have in this report, then I would recommend that you consider the information that's in this report as to whether or not you put it to public hearing. But really, if you put a file to public hearing, in my mind, you're saying that you as a committee are okay with the feedback from the public holding more weight in respect to the process.
okay. So not more information we might get, but more the external, okay.
Yeah, and through the chair, that being said, if there's something that's not in this report that you think you might need as well, it's also your right to ask staff to prepare more for the public hearing or when you're bringing back the report for 3rd reading.
Okay.
So, if I could, then that would be if it was referral to public, 2 readings and referral to public hearing, subject to staff providing additional information on specific concerns. Would that be what you'd see as the appropriate path?
Yeah, through the chair, you could definitely put it in motion, or it could be a separate direction to staff.
Okay, sorry, Director Newell, back to you.
Okay, so, so we've had,
Director.
Okay, I'm gonna make a motion. I'm gonna move the second option.
Option 2.
Option 2,
as
which
read
is,
the
but I
specific-
can't do all of 2 because I can't be tell myself, so it would have to be separated if I move option 2.
Yeah, division.
And I'd like to speak to it.
So do we, just let me But back to that, I was on that. a minute ago now. Yes, so
I gotta find it
moving
too.
the first part, not the end, further.
Yeah.
Do we have a second for that recommendation? We have a second, Newell and then Cunningham was also wanting to speak, but please go ahead, Director Newell.
Thank you. So speaking in favor of the motion, a couple of very interesting case. What has led me to feel comfortable with moving this motion, which would then move toward approving this subdivision to two lots that are slightly smaller than is allowed within the area F, RF1, and that massive area, if you look at the map that is yellow, that are 1 acre lots, not 1 hectare. That was done at the time of zoning, which we've spoken about often, back in the 90s, I guess. We've also at this board, at this RAC table, had a number of discussions about lot size, about septic, about the complexity of septic and the options that are available to septic, and IHA's recommendation of that type of septic system that is maybe larger in area needed certainly is not the only option. And I, at a public hearing, Rural Affairs, 3 years ago, we approved the Ellis property to be built with a slight reduction on the setback from Kootenai Lake to 12 meters. And this is a small lot on the lake that is functioning 100% well. So I'm less uncomfortable with a acre lot or close to an acre lot being approved with another mitigating factor, and that is the aforementioned panhandle, which will not be developed, will not be used in any way to contaminate or create. It's like a bonus area to the 0.43 hectare lots in the proposal. So with those thoughts in mind, I moved the first part of option 2, which is to give a first and second reading and refer to a public hearing. Thank you.
Thank you. And just to confirm, Director Cunningham, did you want to speak to the recommendation?
Okay, the recommendation is, no comment.
Okay, any further speakers to the recommendation? Again, don't see anything online. Hearing none, no questions for staff. All in favor of first and second reading?
The second motion.
Okay, that is carried. That will now go through the process. It will end in 4. It won't return to rural committee. Second recommendation to delegate authority for chairing the public hearing to Newell. That's moved by Watson, second Popov. Much discussion, I don't think. All in favor? That is carried as well. And now, again, will become a board process, not a committee process. Thanks very much. Looking at the time, this keeps telling me it's 11:15, which it is at home in the Mountain Time Zone where some of us live. It's 10:15. We do have delegation here for 8.5. And then 8.6, we move into a little different mode. So I think we should move on to 8.5 right now. This is OCP and zoning plan amendment spearhead, electoral area F again. We do have, is it Noam Irani?
He's there.
And speaking to it though, sorry, is
Ben Hall, one of the partners at Spearhead.
Ben Hall. And you've captured that, Christine, have you? Okay, thanks very much. So you've seen the process. Maybe very quickly we'll ask for a sort of a Paul's notes from staff, if you wanted to go ahead, Zach, and then we will turn it to you as a delegation.
Thanks. Through the chair, the application being considered today as proposed by Spearhead is a land use bylaw amendment that involves rezoning the property to a comprehensive development zone from the existing country residential zone and changing the land use designation from country residential to industrial. The overall proposal is a pretty significant expansion of the existing industrial use that involves using 3 existing residential lots that are proposed to be consolidated. And then a large workshop building would be constructed on those 3 consolidated lots. A commercial industrial development permit would be required if this does move forward. But given the lack of development permit guidelines to address certain concerns or considerations of the development, staff are recommending that additional information be provided subsequent to this meeting to address concerns that were brought forward by several external agencies in the referral responses, as well as responses from surrounding landowners. So yeah, here to answer any questions if there are any.
Okay, thanks. And all of those concerns that you indicate we have multiple recommendations, and all of those concerns for staff are addressed in the recommendations. Okay, thanks. So we will then next go to Ben. Mr. Hall, please, any additional information you can give us, and then if you can answer any questions from the committee.
Yeah, thank you everyone, and thanks to Zachary and staff for the very thorough report. We have engaged professional consultants to start dealing with all 5 of the recommendations. Those are nearing completion, underway, or just getting started, and we will present those reports back to staff process as soon as they're available. We expect those to be available pretty soon. I don't have any other significant comments this time.
I have a question, because you're well underway with the consultants or the feedback or the solutions to the questions raised. That would all be ready and available and sort of consolidated by staff prior to the scheduling of the public hearing?
That's a question to me.
Well, I guess, what is your timeline for having that information to staff so they could make sure that it was in place to answer the public's questions, maybe preemptively?
Yeah, I think it can be pretty quick. I can speak to that a bit. Organizing the sub-consultants. We already have an archaeological study that's been done, and they've already recommended that no further study be done. Our biggest hurdle right now is going to be a groundwater assessment, just because there's nobody in the area that can do that quickly. So we've reached out to several firms, and we're just waiting to get responses back. Everything else is well underway, and we should be able to have that stuff within a month.
Okay, thank you. So I jumped top of the queue, but other questions from other members of the committee for the applicant? Watson, please go ahead.
If permitted, I just wanted to comment that it's super, what's the word I'm looking for, innovative. I think it's really impressive work, especially in a rural area where, you know, forestry and value added wood products are difficult given our supply chain and international details. I just want to say that it's really impressive, and I think it's a really good thing for rural economies trying to regionalize their economy. So it's just more of a comment that I had to say. It's
nope, fair enough.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the committee? That's pretty straightforward, I guess. If you wouldn't mind returning to the gallery, we will look at this series of recommendations. Yes, Director Newell.
I'd like to move the recommendation as presented in the staff report. I won't read it out.
We can,
but it does have 5 conditions that were aforementioned and are being addressed.
So there's a series of, we can move 3 as a block. And the last one you shouldn't be moving, that's the delegated authority. But there, would you want to move the first three recommendations?
Sorry, I was reading it off the staff report, so yes.
Yeah, so the first one is OCP amendment, second one is zoning amendment, third one is prior to considering third reading, that there are 5 issues
Yeah.
are addressed.
Those three, yes, thank you.
Yeah. But do we have a second for those 3 recommendations as a block? Vandenberg, that's a second. And that's partly why I asked about, it'd be nice if well before third reading, we actually had the answer to the 5 issues, or as far as possible, discussion on the block recommendations. Seeing none, I don't see anybody online on favor. Any opposed? So those 3 are carried, and then the 4th recommendation, Vandenberg to delegate authority to chair the public meeting, seconded Weatherhead. Discussion? Seeing none on favor? That's carried. Thank you very much. So 8.6 OCP review, I don't know, maybe this is this good time to get up and take a stretch until
Chair,
half past until 10:30 in this time zone. Thanks everybody who's come in from various applications. Good morning, Stuart. Good morning. Sorry?
David off on Zoom, I don't know what you're trying to say, but.
All right, we are muted now.
Gary, you're not muted. The boardroom is not muted.
Amy's just saying, Andy unmuted.
You guys think you're muted, but you're not muted.
Sorry.
Can we mute the room?
It's right there, Harry.
Oh, it's this one.
We do.
Yeah.
paradigm shift.
So we are going to call the meeting back to order. If everybody could find their way back to the seat, we had a little longer break than we anticipated. Can we do a sound check? Director Davidoff, you unmuted just before the break or as we were breaking. How is the sound right now?
It's excellent, Chair. Thank you very much for checking.
Okay, and then did I miss something as we went into break? Because I think you had unmuted right at that moment.
No, Chair, I sorted out what it was. It was a question, but I'm good, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Everybody was ready for a break. So the next one we're moving to is 8.6, which I think is appropriate for you to be unmuted, Director Davidoff. So this is the jumping off point to a major next step on the Area I OCP. We do have a little bit of an update from staff. I understand, Stephanie, that there was a advisory planning commission meeting just yesterday, so it's not in writing. But can we have a verbal update? What transpired at the meeting?
Yes, thank you, Chair Jackman. So as we all know, in response to this item being referred from the November Rural Affairs Committee meeting, I'm happy to provide an update on last night's Advisory Planning and Heritage Commission meeting in Area I. The APHC met and I provided a presentation similar to the one I did at the November Rural Affairs Committee meeting. And the commission members had no concerns, no questions or comments about the draft official community plan for Sentinel Mountain or about any of the related amending bylaws. And then ultimately the APHC resolved to support the staff recommendation in the staff report package forming part of this agenda. And that's for the board to ultimately consider first and second readings of the draft official community plan and related amending bylaws, and to move forward with the scheduling of a public hearing. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we have 4 recommendations that are the complexity of how I&J are tangled between zoning and OCPs and the like. And then we have the 5th recommendation, which of course Director Davidoff should not put his name to, but the 4 could go as a block. So I guess I'll turn it first to Director Davidoff. Are you ready to move recommendations? Are there any other clarifications to cover?
I'd like to move the recommendations, and if there's a seconder, then I'd like to open, Chair. So with great pleasure, I move our long-awaited resolutions 1 through 4 for board consideration tomorrow.
As a block.
As a block.
Second?
I'll second it.
Hanegraaff, Director Hanegraaff seconds. Okay, back to you, Director Davidoff.
Yes, so I just want to thank staff for all the work that they've done on this. I also want to acknowledge that I said some words that were not appropriate. And I've apologized to staff for that. And basically, I know we had an awesome meeting last night. You know, Stephanie was there, and it was kind of a celebration. So we ate a few chocolates, and we were planning kind of next steps on this. But just want to commend staff for everything they've done on this. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Director. If you were here at CSLAC, was it yesterday? Director Weatherhead's been doing a really good job of supplying us with chocolates in the committee room here. So it wasn't you the other day. Was it? Oh, it was Shelley. Oh, okay. Oh, yes. You just circulated it. Okay, thank you, Director. So we have the 4 recommendations. We've had pretty good conversation over this. Committee's had lots of conversation on these block of recommendations. Further discussion. See anybody in chat or online? Nobody in the room. So seeing none, all in favor. Any opposed? So those are carried. They will go to board and beyond. And so the 5th recommendation to the board, Director Davidoff being delegated authority to chair the public hearing. We could have fun with this, or we could be straight up with it. Do we have Director Hanegraaff moves that recommendation? Do we have second? Popoff discussion. Seeing none, all in favor. Okay, and I'm curious, when's this public hearing going to be? Do I get to no. Okay.
No, that's a good point. I wouldn't mind that because it's kind of one of the first ones I may be able to attend it. I wouldn't mind it just being
a heads up.
A heads up to the board that when the public hearing is held.
Sure, Director Newell, that's a good recommendation. Just yeah, it's a new format and a lot of updates to language. That'd be interesting to see how community formally receives it. It may go the way of some of our public hearings where they're satisfied to the point to get 1 or 2 people and that's it. We shall see. Item 10.1 is the Community Works Fund application. Yeah, fire hall overhead door. Oh, sorry.
There's number 9 on the agenda. But
there are 9. Sorry, there are no environmental services.
Oh, I see. Okay, sorry.
And I should have acknowledged.
I saw
number 9.
No, came in, so I thought there was.
Uli is still reluctantly reluctantly tagged to reviewing the community works applications, whatever they're called this week. General Manager Wolf gets to allocate a portion of his staff time and his own time to these. So 10.1, Yak Fire Hall overhead door repair and heat pump upgrade, I guess it's called. And this is electoral area B. Ashley Grant finalized a report for us. It's ask in the amount of $90,618 from Area B's allocation. Director Tierney, you had questions, I believe. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm going to be asking if this could be referred to January, Chair.
So that's not a motion to refer yet, but you're going to ask questions and then potentially refer, just so I don't get into the conundrum I kind of put myself in a little while ago. So
Thank you,
with your
Chair.
questions first.
Yes, wonder if there's any staff here that could speak to this issue. My concern is, of the $90,000 being asked for community works, $77,500 is, pay for a new heat pump system for the fire hall. Heat's important in the fire hall. However, my understanding is that the heating system that's presently in there has failed. So there is some urgency, if it's failed entirely. If my curiosity is whether the system has been operating on a natural gas system, if there are natural gas lines in the area. I know there's a major pipeline, but I'm not sure if there's feeder lines in the Yak area. $77,500 is a lot of money for a heat pump system. Possibly, if it is a gas furnace, natural gas furnace, perhaps it should be furnace replaced instead. As well, there's $14,000 being asked for overhead door repair. Last year's budget, where the budget was increased by $55,000, some of the reasons for that 25% increase to their budget last year was to repair the overhead door, and I'm not sure what portion of that $55,000 was, but obviously the work didn't get done, and they're hoping to complete it through the community works grant process. So I have further questions to ask, and would request that this be referred to the January.
Do you want to see if there's an answer to any of the questions now, or just simply make a referral and take the conversation offline? Your choice.
I'd like to see if there's answers now, but I don't see if there's any staff there.
And because I have hands up from Director Vandenberg and Popoff. Prior to making a referral motion, we could hear maybe other comments, if that's okay. Cunningham, sorry. So Vandenberg, Popoff, Cunningham, please, Director Vandenberg, the floor is yours. And
Thank you, but I believe that Director Tierney has raised what I had in mind.
Okay, Director Popoff.
Yeah, through the chair, a question to staff. When we do these community work funds applications that come in front of the Rural Affairs Committee, are they not reviewed by the director before they come before us? Or is it staff that just puts it on the agenda and then we discuss it at the board? My understanding was in the past, if there's a community works funds application, staff contacts the director, we go over it, ask all the questions, make sure everything's all answered and everything else. And then it comes up at Rural Affairs basically for approval, or maybe questions that were not asked at that time.
So with that, maybe to Director Tierney first, and then if staff has anything to add, go ahead, Director Tierney.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I don't believe I asked the appropriate questions during the meeting. We did have it, and I was more concerned about the $77,500 for heat pump than asking whether there was natural gas and whether the furnace was a natural gas furnace.
All I want to know is whether it was reviewed with the director.
Yeah.
And there might be subsequent questions as mentioned by Director Tierney. Thank you.
Hey, Director Cunningham.
Thank you. You know, this application was referred by our district, looked at by our district fire staff. The reason I say that is about a year and a half ago, I asked, I wanted to put in a heat pump into the Weimar Fire Department, and I was informed by district fire staff that they would investigate and in fact do the work on my behalf, and I would hear about it. Well, it's been a year and a half, I haven't heard anything. So I was just wondering if you had referred that, and if you had, you got action rather quickly, more quickly than I did. So
So, comments from staff or the director?
Yeah, I can, through the chair, yeah. Our regional fire chief is working on the Lammer one. I think the problem with this one is that the heat system failed at Yak, which is what has bumped this up the queue. In terms of Director Tierney's questions, I really would recommend that you consider referring the matter and allow Director Tierney to meet with the project team.
Yeah. So I do have, well, I will return it to Director Cunningham if he had anything further, then go to Director Noel and then back to.
Thank you, nothing further, I understand that maybe the Weimer one will fail very quickly too. So that's,
no,
appropriate, but it's an understanding of that, sometimes the waiting line, kind of becomes excessive and you do return. And I didn't want to talk to district staff specifically because I didn't know exactly which district staff member they located, actually handles it now. That's why I referred to the director, but I wanted to see one of this thing. Thank you.
So to answer that, would any director looking into a community works fund application, whether it's in progress or in queue, would they talk to Ashley Grant first? Would they talk to someone else? Uli?
From my side, I review the eligibility and sometimes some technical aspects, but the application itself should come from the property, the project owner, in conjunction with the project manager that in this case leads the project. So, but any communication with the director in regards to the scope of the project and the funds associated with it should be between the project owners, sometimes delegated through the project manager, but that's not something we do.
But to identify who owns the project, could that be funneled through you for consistency?
No,
okay.
In fact, the
facility
the application should be written by the project owner.
Yes.
Sometimes delegated to the project manager. Personally, I prefer if the project owner is closely involved, and they should have that communication.
If it's a fire hall, fire services, if it's a rec center, services. Fair enough. Newell, Schmink, and then we'll go back to Director Kearney.
Could I make a comment after the motion?
Yep.
It doesn't.
Okay, Director Schmink.
Thank you, Chair, through the staff. I just want to ensure that if there's a major cold spell that shows up, does the staff have the tools to deal with it?
Through the chair, I don't have that question, or I don't have that answer on hand. I have to ask fire staff about that.
Okay, and the question I have is would if you would need those tools, if you find out at the board meeting before the board meeting, because then you can, I'm not sure if we're allowed to, but you could power to act or something like that with the board chair signing off in case, I mean, if we're at the heat in the building, in case there's an emergency and we got a big cold spell, that's the thing I'm concerned about.
Really?
Just briefly throw that in emergency situations, staff has actually other authorities than they normally would have to request that. So I would consider that an emergency. Absolutely, would agree.
Yeah, through the chair, we go on our purchasing policy on that, and then in certain circumstances, if it was outside the purchasing policy, we had to approve something that was an emergency. My responsibility is to inform the board that we've either entered into an agreement or made a purchase that was considered an emergency. Yeah.
Good point. Thank you. Director Kearney, if you wish to refer, and then to when, it's back to you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think I failed to ask the right questions and amount of questions, and I recently put in a heat pump system in my house 2 months ago, and $13,000, and fairly large house, $77,000 is a lot of money, and I need to ask further questions. I wonder if this could be referred. To make the motion to refer till
January Rural Affairs Committee. Do we have a second on referral? Seconded. So on propriety of referral, I'm going to be careful here. Is there anything we missed? We're going to have one-on-one conversation. Seeing nothing to be added, Director Newell will hold off till later. All in favor of referral? So that will not go to board right now. And refer to RAC January. And let's loop back to Director Newell. You had an observation before we
Yes, I'd like to let the Rural Affairs Committee know, and those of us that do have fire halls within our jurisdiction, that the Beasley Fire Hall has undergone a major upgrade through Community Works funding and reserves. And 2 days ago at the budget meeting, the chief was there, Monica, and I can't understate the power of the heat pump as a resource for the fire department, as a positive resource. She continues to rave about the summer and how much of a difference it made during the summer and during the winter. Heat pumps are, I don't know what we paid for ours out in Beasley, but she just cannot speak highly enough of that addition to the fire hall, amongst many others, but heat pump, legit. So it can be a cooling station, it can be a this or that for the community. Very valuable community resource.
So want to avoid a bit of a rabbit hole here potentially. We have referred this.
Yes,
We'll come
yes.
back. Quickly, Director May,
Yes,
we did offer you freedom of the floor.
Thank you.
And before we move to the next recommendation.
Yeah, on the matter of a heat pump, I also have a heat pump at home, they're fabulous. I would want Director Cheney to be aware of asking whether there's a backup generator included in that $70,000 price, because if there's a power outage, there's also a heat pump outage. And we're looking into a heat pump for Memorial Hall, we're looking into now as a generator.
Interesting observation, actually, because the gen set has other advantages when you have an emergency services building. So good point. Glad we're not somebody's not too strict on speakers list here. So we will move now. I see Mike has joined us. Mr. Morrison is in the meeting. This is we're gonna have maybe a big speakers list. I already have Director Davidoff on the list for 10.2, but first we're going to hear from Mr. Morrison on what we might see coming down the line in terms of priority of where we will be sanctioned or permitted to spend our community works fund. Mike, the floor is yours.
Thank you through the chair. I don't really have anything beyond what's written in the report to offer now. Obviously, this is a pretty significant change on the part of UBCM, and it will have a significant impact to how we've traditionally allocated the community works funds. So I'll take questions if anyone has anything specific, but I tried my best to kind of paint the entire picture within the report there.
To me, this is not hard and fast yet, and so do you want to do a bit of a Coles Notes as to how firm this direction to prioritize our facilities is going to be? Can you give us maybe a 3-minute Coles Notes on your interpretation? Is this what's coming down the road, what strength it's going to have? Or are we going to be looking for exceptions to it left, right, and center and be successful?
That's a good question, and it's an open question at this point. UBCM hasn't identified specifically, anything but they expect adherence to the new requirements. So, those being the inclusion of projects within our long-term capital plan. They want to see that we haven't prioritized external projects over internal projects. And, an example that they used of situations that they've encountered with regional districts related to that is that, essentially they see sometimes that regional districts are holding on to community works funds for third-party projects and then applying for other grants for internal projects, when the expectation would be that the regional district use community works funds for internal projects. So that's something that they flagged, and I think that specifically is behind that requirement for them saying that we have to show that we haven't prioritized external projects over internal projects. And they also really hammered home that that requirement for projects to be supported by asset management planning. And that's certainly something that in the external applications that we receive is generally kind of a shortcoming with third-party projects, specifically ones that are, coming from community groups or societies that might not have really a full understanding of asset management and have limited ability to have that documented. So when you put these three things together, these are new requirements, and they are specifically put in place by UBCM to address the use of Community Works funds for external projects, which is not just specific to the RDCK. It's unique to regional districts, but they're very clear that this is something that was flagged by Infrastructure Canada, which administers the fund on behalf of the federal government. And this is them, sort of tightening things up and making sure that, these requirements don't suggest that third-party projects cannot be funded. It just means that there's much tighter requirements for doing so. And as noted in the report, historically, about 2/3 of our Community Works funds have gone to third parties rather than internal projects. And this is something that the government of Canada really wants to. This program was intended for local government infrastructure, not for third-party projects. And in implementing these new requirements, they're really trying to nudge us in the direction of using the Community Works funds for internal projects, or making sure that if there are external projects being funded, they really align with the long-term plans for the regional district.
Thanks, Mike. I was hoping you flagged kind of the 3 pinch points or top issues. So, and you must have said something either right or wrong, because the speakers list just grew exponentially. So I do have Davidoff, Watson, myself will put to the bottom, Weatherhead, Popoff, Cunningham, and Tierney. Director Davidoff, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. So I think my understanding is that there are three directors who felt the sting of the new rules and had our Community Works applications denied. I know I'm one of them, and my application was for recreation infrastructure in the Norns on a parking lot expansion, and we met all the requirements. We worked really hard with the group. It was the Castlegar Snowmobile Club. And basically our application for $30,000 was denied, left me scrambling because I made a promise, a commitment. And so I have utilized 1/4 of my community development funds to help to pay for this. I want to thank Director Hennegraff for contributing $12,500 towards this project. I want to thank Director Papa for contributing $5,000. We are in scramble, panic mode right now. I am. I've made commitments to halls where I have to contribute 25% of this, towards the CBT program for energy retrofits. And now I have no idea what the status of that is. We have made commitments on the books. Many of us, I'm sure all rural directors have done that. And basically I'm getting calls. This is out there. We discussed this last night at our APHC meeting. And I just would like to summarize and through the chair, I appreciate you giving me a little bit of time here, but I just want to summarize what I think has happened. And then I would like staff to confirm that my perception is correct. So my understanding of what's occurred is that we have not been following the rules for a long time. What we're doing in BC was an anomaly from the rest of Canada. What we were doing in the RDCK was an anomaly from what was happening within BC. And basically we have not been compliant for a very long time, but UBCM tolerated it, but now has cracked down very hard on all of us, saying that the third party grants that we've been committing to and providing have to be done in a certain way. And I cannot see any of my third party people providing an asset management plan. They can't afford anything Never mind agreeing to provide an asset management plan on how they're going to keep their community hall working, and how they would never qualify for the funding under the new criteria. I cannot see almost any of the organizations that I currently support with community works funds qualifying. Not only that, I can't even support any water systems because they will not have the capacity to do an asset management plan. This is a paradigm shift in our ability to support our constituents and their needs.
So, Director, can we separate the first part of your question from the new requirements? That might be easier for staff because they're ready to respond. I think to the first one, you questioned whether we have been following the rules prior to the change in rules. Can we ask staff to respond to that? Because I think that's where I see some hands have gone up. And then, yes, we'll have to continue dealing with the changed rules. So can we jump to that one first? I see Uli and Stuart both with comments.
So, Chair, I agree with that as long as I can have a supplemental.
Yes, yep. So let's do with the one issue. Historical practice, how have we been doing?
Yeah, I just wanted to answer the second part of the question in regards to asset management planning being a hurdle. Asset management.
I can do historical.
So can we let Stuart take over and speak to the historical practice first? Then maybe jump back to Director Davidoff if he had another thought, and then back to you, Uli. Thanks. CEO.
Yeah, through the chair, I don't think we've been breaking the rules. And Uli can maybe speak to some of the historical audits, but I think over the years when UBCM's come in and looked at our projects, there's only been a handful, maybe a couple, where they've said you shouldn't have funded that through the Community Works program. So they're definitely, I wouldn't say they're clamping down so much as this has been something they floated out as kind of like a motherhood statement in the past, and now they're writing it in the agreement as a requirement. So it's something that they would have preferred local governments do, but never held us to it. And then now they're saying you have to do it. The fundamental reason for that, in my opinion, is that regional districts are unique across the country. Every other local government in Canada has sewer, water, and road infrastructure that they have to maintain. So they can spend their community works allocation on those three things in a heartbeat. We don't have those, obviously, outside of our water systems, which again are unique in the sense that they're only in one electoral area, not regional district wide. So that is the reason why I think we're in the position we are today, where directors are getting calls from community groups, from non-RDCK water systems to be able to provide that. I'll let Uli speak to the asset management plan, because I think, Director Davidoff, you were slightly confused between the long-term planning aspect of what UBCM might be looking for and an asset management plan. So maybe if Uli could touch on that, Chair, if you wanted further discussion on the first part.
If I can expand on this.
Well, hang on a second. On the first part, and I'm way down the speaker list, I have points to loop back to that. And as we're all going through this, historically, opportunity and lack of opportunity or not, I like to kind of separate this a little bit, because if there's a hard and fast rule into the future, we need to come up with points that we can take action over. Director Davidoff, can we jump to Uli for a minute and back to you to sort of where the asset management plan, the interpretation of what that means? Is that what you're going to explain, Uli?
Two things. One was on the background a little bit, historical background, but the other one was the asset management plan.
Historical.
In regards to the problem of using funds on external projects, this is actually a BC specific problem. I believe, and Mike, you correct me if I'm wrong, in the conversation with UBCM, they pointed out that only one project in all of Canada outside BC was an externally funded project. So it is a BC specific, unique problem that they are trying to address. So we are on a federal level an outlier. So that's a bit the background why the somewhat more stringent requirements that are coming down. On the asset
On
management,
the word problem, it's an issue, not a problem to do with equity, and I won't get to speak on that for 20 minutes, but in my mind, we don't have a problem. We have an issue of equity. Who owns the water systems? Carry on, please, Uli.
So,
Then back to
sorry,
Director
but I'm
Davidoff.
getting to the water system. So first of all, water systems, like other services that are municipal alike, or have a lot less scrutiny. So we were assured that they are eligible, similar to the in-house one, because they're providing municipal style services. So water services explicitly is something that Mike and I had the discussion about. That is totally acceptable, that they made a point of that. But the same rules should apply that apply to internal projects, and asset management planning is one of them. So the same scrutiny that we apply to ourselves should be applied to the external projects. Asset management planning is an eligible project. So we have in some projects, Director Hanegraaff is aware of that, we have actually funded not only the project that they requested money for, but because asset management planning was required, if the director agreed to fund that component, we made both of that fundable and a single application. So the asset management planning is not a no-go situation if the director is willing and able to fund the asset management planning piece. And I think that's a good starting point for any asset that you try to maintain anyhow.
Okay, thank you. So I want to go back to Director Davidoff because I see you have a struggle with the path forward. We all have exactly the same struggle. So Director Davidoff, before we go through the rest of the speakers list, I don't know if that helps you at all, but to complete your thoughts on this, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Chair. This is going to be a robust conversation, and unfortunately, I have to leave in 3 minutes. I have an appointment. I won't say what it's for in Trail, and I need to get there for 11:45. I just want to say, we discussed this at our APHC last night, and we are so concerned about this. I totally oppose the resolution, and I'm going to say it now, that the recommendation that staff is making, we need time to digest. We need transition. We need to say, how do we honor commitments we've made? So I hope that conversation will continue without me, but I am opposed to the resolution, the recommendation that staff has made. So on that, I will stop, Chair, and let everyone else speak. I'm sure everyone has a lot of very strong opinions on what's happening here. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Need time to digest is so true, I think. So I have, and we probably end up running the table. I have Watson, kick myself to the bottom, Weatherhead, Popoff, Cunningham, Tierney, Maine. Chair Watson, your thoughts?
Yeah, so I share the concerns. I understand where it's coming from. We did get a heads up that they might go in this direction. I think the big disconnect is that when the regulations are based on urban settings, we have so many servicing that falls outside the box. And so that's why we have to get creative. So when we get to it, I'd like to add an amendment to the motion or move it with an amendment that directs the chair and the CAO to discuss with UBCM and associated decision makers on the impacts this will have. And to highlight that I'm not making that motion now. I'm wanting for the table, but I would like to encourage that we actually go and talk to them about what this will do. The biggest pieces for me is that for any community works applications that have gone through D in the last while, specifically the Ainsworth sewer one, which I feel like, oh God, I hope that didn't make this happen, is that we've required asset management planning. Their budgets, and we took, I don't know how many months, and Uli was fantastic in that, to say you cannot apply if you do not have asset management planning in place. So we have been requiring that. And I think the biggest piece we need to advocate around is if you want to change your regulations to be based on densification, so they're actually feasible for rural areas, then by all means do this. If you can't do that, and we're still dealing with urban-based regulations for water, for fire, for our rec services, all these different things, rec not so much, then that's the bind you put us in. Like you're disregarding what rural communities are doing, which is predominantly nonprofit-based servicing combined with local government, because it's not equitable to offer the service based on geography and densification. The other thing I'll say is that the biggest impact this is going to have is on our broadband and communications. If we cannot continue to do that, we would not have the communication systems internet we currently have. Millions of dollars of community works has gone to all of our ISPs to enable the federal grants that they're getting to be able to provide the services, because businesses won't. So these things need to be raised. This is a concern. I think staff has done an incredible job to raise the rural issues as much as possible. And so thank you, staff, for continuing to advocate for us. Unfortunately, this falls in another realm of other orders of government being pretty unaware of how things work in rural areas. And I think the other provinces, like, we just don't have development in rural areas. I don't know. So that's mainly what I wanted to say. And I'll leave the addition of advocacy from this board until we're completed the conversation. Or if Stuart had comment on that.
I see Mike had unmuted and then, but CAO and.
Through the chair, and it's too bad Director Davidoff had to go because he made this little bit of confusion as well. I don't want you to get bogged down in asset management plans because that will be required regardless. This is not what this is about. What it's about is that they expect that the regional district has done work to say, for example, the Castlegar Snowmobile Club is part of our recreation master planning, and we accept the fact that there's a separate society that is doing that work. We are not doing it, but it's in a document that you've all approved or the board has approved to say, yeah, we promote snowmobiling or access to the backcountry, and this is where that group leaves from, and that's why we're supporting their parking lot. That's what UBCM would be looking for. Asset management planning still required for every application that they would approve, and has been for a little while now. It's been something that we've been trying to kick up, especially with the external groups. But that's the difference in what they're asking for. They're not, the asset management plan isn't new. That long-term strategic planning is, and incorporating what those societies are doing, because what UBCM is saying, are they performing a local government service or a local government like service? And there's nothing wrong with us leaning on volunteer groups and societies to provide that service, but it has to be documented by the RD.
Can I ask a supplemental based on that?
Supplemental, and Mike may have had something to add. Go ahead.
So I'm gonna ask a very specific one. We have contribution services for rec halls, 7 halls in Area D. We don't have a rec master plan. Can we still fund them because they're a contribution service, as long as they have asset planning and all the other criteria, without doing a rec master plan?
That would be something we probably have to take back to UBCM through the chair, looking to Uli to nod on that one. Okay. I don't know if, because they're funded through the RD, that's automatically considered a local government type service, or if it's something where we need more documentation as to what our relationship is with the group. Like, you know, there's a motion on the books to have the directors more involved in budgeting with respect to those community groups, so that you have input on what they're doing, as opposed to seeing something at the end of the year. What have you done versus what are you planning on doing? I think even that might be a good starting point for UBCM to say, yeah, you're having those conversations, you're talking to them and providing input direction as to what they're doing with taxpayer dollars at their community hall. And that could be a starting point.
Before going to Uli, if we do, Mike, you've unmuted a couple times. Go ahead.
Okay, yeah, just with regards to the grant and aid services, we did raise that specifically with UBCM, and it sounded like there was some openness to consider allowing funding for that would qualify for being included in our planning. But you know, it was a very general conversation about that, but it appeared that there was some openness to allowing that. And I just wanted to speak to Director Watson's point about the meeting with UBCM to discuss this. Brett Felker, who's the program manager for UBCM, did offer to come and speak to the board or to the Rural Affairs Committee about these changes. And prior to the report landing on the agenda, I did send it to their staff for their review and confirmation that things were factually represented correctly there.
We can look at if it's RAC or board.
Yeah. That's fine with me. That's good to know because I wouldn't necessarily propose another motion then because that brings them to our table. So that's fine. But what I do want to note is, has staff raised how much funding of Community Works has gone to broadband implementation, and then that's been required for other ISTs, and that's how we're communicating or have internet?
Through the chair, no, we did not specifically raise that aspect with them.
Okay, I think we need to take action items here that we're gonna put back into the response saying, without this, we will have no equity for access to water here, broadband there, something else here. And I hope that's what we'll collect out of this. You do have a long speakers list. So if we could go to, where are we at, Watson? Oh, we're down to Weatherhead, Pop-Up, Cunningham, Tierney, Maine, Jackman, Weatherhead.
Thank you. Yeah, this quite a shock in some ways that anytime I fund a water service through Community Works, I'm actually 2/3 of it is going back to the Crown Corporation, BC Hydro. And so that's always, that one really has me scratching my head. But my question actually is, because we had committed funds to fiber to home, where does that land now?
Really, Mike Stewart, I have the same question.
Yeah, like through the chair, I think, you know, it's not that I'm trying to communicate the right level of concern. I'm not as concerned with those applications. Maybe I'll just leave it at that, because there's been so much advocacy work done around this table for connectivity. We every year have issues around emergency management with connectivity. There's been meetings with directors on cell phone coverage in certain areas and redundancy work. I think we could prove that the board is very much considering connectivity part of your mandate as a board in terms of advocacy, and you just don't have the taxpayer dollars to do it. Community Works can help leverage. Holy smokes, how much of some of those CBBC projects, right? The amount of money that can be leveraged with relatively small amounts from Community Works, I don't think it's something where UDCM would deny those projects. I think we can support that.
Okay.
Further, Director?
No, I can't really ask a question about my dilemma with BC Hydro. That one's just a dilemma. So,
Hey, Director Papa.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And I think Stuart answered my question about connectivity. We've already got agreements in place with Columbia Basin Broadband Corporation. They're there over a structured 3-year period of repayment, etc. But we're not done yet. There's a lot more connectivity projects that's going to be coming forward. So if we can get that clarification from them, that would be great, so that we can fund something like that. And it's very important because it involves different orders of government, provincial and federal contributions, etc. So the other thing that I've got is water systems. We have subdivisions that are already in place and they need upgrading. And how are we going to fund water systems? Not, you know, their intent is not to become part of the regional district water service, but they need upgrading like a secondary well because the aquifer is going down, etc. So are those going to be funded? And a follow-up on that is improvement in irrigation districts. I've been working on this for 16 years. It's quite a few years to get funding from the province for those. And we have been able to use our Community Works funds for irrigation and improvement because they were once a form of local government.
Still are.
So, and you know, possibly some of them have intentions of becoming a regional district water system. Some don't. Some function quite well on their own. That is with the other concern that I have. Are we going to continue funding those water systems? Because water is, you know, you take a look at the United Nations. I mean, it's a human right.
I kind of jumped past Uli before anyway, so looping back to Uli mostly on this, but I'm going to miss input on something.
I think everything that was discussed is factual and reflects our discussion with UDCM. Water systems is not really their concern. That is a service similar to municipal services. They have not expressed their concern about it, other than applying the same screening tools that we apply for our internal services, and asset management planning being one of them. And I think it makes sense to not just throw out grants and say, okay, and come again with your grant application for the next project you have, but them having that discussion and knowledge what the future operation and replacement of the assets costs, what is a reasonable user fee, and how much role in that whole financial needs are in the future grants play, and how much is coming from internal revenues, user fees. And that's no different than what we apply to all our water services right now. There's no water service internally that is entirely reliant on community works or other grants. They are always augmented or mainly funded by user fees, and the grants play an augmenting role. And I think that's the same screening tool we would apply to external water systems. So I'm not concerned, and similarly, the discussion about as Stuart pointed out, the fiber optics piece. I did not hear that from UBCM being an issue. It is the pieces that are clearly external and are not reflected in any form of strategic planning document within the regional district.
Thanks.
So
Further, Director.
just further on that, we have been applying to the regional district some areas for the infrastructure planning grants. And that's part of the process moving forward in that to acquire funding with community works funds. So I'll give you an example. A water system that I'm working on is over $3 million for 77 water users. They need support, provincial and community works funds. And the last question, is this federally driven or is this provincially driven?
Like the change.
It's clearly federally driven.
It sounded like.
As I said, BC is the outlier in the way we use the money. That pressure is forward to UBCM to address the issue in regards to a somewhat uncontrolled external use and undermining to some degree the intent of the grants, augmenting municipally owned infrastructure, and be that grant system that can be applied in a planned fashion by the municipality, saying, we know we get these many grants, and here are our services that need money and be augmented. That we use it externally in rural areas makes sense, but like I said, with a similar scrutiny in regards to how these funds are being used for external municipal type services.
So the reason for my question on that is, where do we direct our advocacy to? And I was looking at Director Main when she smiled at me, so she knows where we're going with this, whether we're going provincially or federally or both.
Both. And yeah, good point. And I noted in Mike's opening comments, this was flagged by Infrastructure Canada, he said. So yes, we need to be aware there's a couple levels here. Director Cunningham.
Yes, thank you. First of all, a question through the chair. I'm on page 236, and it talks about which identifies the project with the following criteria. But the last two items, they want to know the population directly served by the project, the First Nations population served by the project. That sort of sounds like a federal kind of thing. But the last two is an output metric and an outcome metric. First of all, can someone define metric for me? I understand what metric is when I talk about kilometer. I don't understand what metric is when I'm talking about this. I think I'm going more specific. And what's the difference between output and outcome with regards to these projects? I don't want that answer right now, but I'd like to have some kind of thing. And also, my second item, if I may, through the chair,
yes,
is that the recommendation is before us, and that's really what we should be debating. And I believe that the recommendation is good in the way it's written. The other things with regards to talking to the federal government or the provincial government and UBCM, I think should be the result of a further motion rather than put into this one, because basically the recommendation says prepare updates. let's see, if we change the policy anytime if we find out more. But I'd like to see in writing exactly what the updates are going to be and exactly, and bring it forward for consideration of 2025. So I would like to, we have moved recommendation, have we?
No, we haven't, but I find your words interesting.
I will-
My scribble says options for updates, but please.
Director, I would like to move that recommendation, pending, discussion by the other directors.
Second. Moved and seconded, that as presented to prepare updates. So, and further, Director Cunningham, or I move along the.
No, you can move on.
Okay, so we have recommendation on the floor now. I still have Tierney, Main, and myself, speakers list, Director Tierney.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm going to speak in favor of the recommendation as well. I think that clarification, updates and clarifications are really what we need. And yeah, to the fact that these funds help other funds come in. I was at a meeting a couple weeks ago with Columbia Basin Trust in a couple of communities where they were talking, they wanted the ideas from the different communities, what was important, and the fact that these communities are stepping up and doing the work for evacuation centers and emergency cooling centers, and it is very important to these communities, and they would not be able to be doing these unless there was some help through Community Works funds to pay that portion that Columbia Basin Trust is asking be paid. They don't have the funds to do that. So basically, it's all been said here. It's really devastating to think that we wouldn't be able to help out in this way. I think the recommendation is well written. People in favor. Thanks.
Thank you, Director Main.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to speak. As a couple of directors have noted, these new, in quotes, requirements are coming from the federal funders, not from UBCM per se. And while it is really important to have a good relationship and work through these things with UBCM, as an organization, RDCK also needs to be engaging with FCM and with the federal portion of the funding of Community Works. I happen to sit on both the Rural Forum and the Standing Committee on Finance, Infrastructure, and Transportation at FCM, and so I can bring this to those discussions, and I would like Rural Affairs to consider the possibility of developing a resolution to go to FCM on this piece of funding that's coming from the federal governments that is being developed strictly, as Chair Watson has noted numerous times. It's an urban model, and we are fighting really hard at FCM to bring that to the attention of the funders and to get a change in that, and developing a resolution to go to FCM would be helpful in our discussions with the federal government, particularly with the potential of a change in government within 6 to 8 months. So I am saying that I would be willing to work with the chair of the board, the chair of this committee, with Mike and Orwitz Stewart to develop such a resolution that actually says what the pieces are that we would like to see brought to the attention of the federal funders of this kind of program.
So I will first. So it doesn't fit under this first recommendation. It's on the floor. However, you have expanded, I think, meaningfully. We kind of have a four-way advocacy thing, which I think will be the next recommendation from this committee. If not by somebody else, maybe by me even, but yeah, UBCM, the province, the feds, whether it's Infrastructure Canada or whoever, and FCM. There's a four-way advocacy piece which maybe we will decide after this recommendation goes through, how we may highlight or focus that advocacy piece. So I guess I'm next on the speakers list. I didn't see anyone else pop back up. And that's kind of my thoughts. Maybe everyone else, you guys covered it. And following this recommendation, what do we have to do internally? Now what are we going to do externally? So seeing no further speakers on this first recommendation.
Can I speak
for a second time? But on the recommendation that's.
I spoke before the recommendation.
Well, you're speaking to this recommendation?
Yes, please.
Yes, for a second time. Or, oh, yes, I see. Yes, that's right. For the first time on the recommendation, Director Popoff, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. On the recommendation that as written, I'm hoping that staff would incorporate our comments with when they bring back the policy, or how is staff going to incorporate our comments that we had a round table here on our concerns in that policy. Question to the chair to staff.
Think about that before Christmas.
Yeah.
So CEO.
Yeah, through the chair, I think Mike's been making some notes and we can talk about how we incorporate the discussion today into the policy changes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So on the recommendation and seeing no further discussion on this recommendation, all in favor? Any opposed? I don't see any. Director Davidoff had left the meeting. He's gone to his appointment. So that's unanimous for what that's not particularly meaningful in committee, I guess. So do we flag now the advocacy piece? Do we wait for staff to come back? Chair Watson.
I just want to first note, and I really appreciate Director Main continuing her work at FCM. Our current appointee is Director Hewitt to FCM. So I just wanted to verify that any of that work going to FCM, we also need to include Director Hewitt on.
Yes.
So I am sending her the report on the email you just sent, just FYI for you. And my question would really be through to staff in terms of, I think we have a couple different avenues. We have obviously FCM with current appointee and then those that are still sitting on the committees, which is great. I don't know that we need a board motion to ask them to do that advocacy. We haven't in the past, so that's fine. If we have the UBCM representative coming to this table, or do we need a motion to invite them? I don't think we do, because we don't usually need motions to invite people. I would be strongly in favor of that, but is there another avenue based on what you've heard from the table today that we need to, on another item, I've already reached out to MLA/Minister Anderson on some issues, and I'd be happy to discuss this with her. Are there other areas from a staff perspective that we need to raise this advocacy?
Between now and the next rack, at least. Who goes staff first? I have a thought.
Yeah, through the chair, I don't really think so, other than in discussions with UBCM, obviously it might be good to invite the individual who wanted to speak to RAC so you can have an audience with them. But, from an FCM perspective, it's always difficult to find people at the federal level who are actually making these decisions or involved in them. And I think that talking to UBCM about where they get their direction from and who we can contact on the federal level would be a good question to ask. Other than that, I don't really have any other suggestions.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Looking at this is more a rural issue than a municipal issue, as mentioned by Stuart, or whatever. We do have an EA director at UBCM that represents the EA directors, and that's Geraldine Kirk. And I'm not going to the EA forum in February, but the directors that are going there, I would appreciate if you maybe have a conversation with Geraldine Kirk, that it is a rural issue, and it's not only our regional district, it's province-wide. And what lobbying or advocacy work she can do on our behalf as rural directors.
Good point. We can flag that for agenda or conversation piece in advance. Director Cunningham.
In fact, we make that a motion that the board communicate with Chairman Kirk with regard to an item we put on the agenda for the meeting that's coming up.
Direction to staff or.
I don't know if that requires a motion, but I would suggest.
Yeah, because does this need to go to the board tomorrow? Direction to staff could prepare a bit of prepare a briefing note that we can use to forward to Geraldine to flush out why we want it to be a topic at the EA forum. And is that a reasonable direction to staff to prepare us a briefing note incorporating our concerns about equity, who provides water, who provides connectivity, et cetera.
Okay. But if that puts it on, if we can get it on the agenda for that meeting,
Yep.
that's figuring all the other regional districts that are there. And also, because UBCM is the sponsor of they also will be absolutely aware, and so therefore we're talking to more than one person or one.
So direction to staff, briefing note that we can use to funnel through the EA form in February. It's the 7th or 8th of February.
And the proposed motion, Director Chair, I'm the chair.
Sorry,
I'll propose motion.
propose it as a direction to staff.
Well, no, it's more than that. We want more than a briefing note. We want a motion that says we send this to Geraldine as to be an item on the agenda for that meeting. Otherwise, it just
Understood. I'm not
I don't
sure.
want to bring it up at the meeting.
Yes.
As an item. I want it to be on the agenda as an item so everybody sees it in advance and brings it up. Therefore, I'm suggesting it be a motion.
So would we be asking the board chair to put that through or the rural chair? Maybe be best communicated by board chair, or I don't know.
I'll just say that any of us can reach out to Jerry Lynn and say, please put this on the agenda. I'm happy to do that. I've asked her several other things and I don't get response, so I'm just a little not super positive about it, but if the board would like me to do that, this is also a public document, so any of us can be advocating to any of our colleagues. If you want a motion, I'm happy to do it as chair. It's not a problem.
I'd like to move that this item be, that we communicate with the EA director at UBCM, requesting that this item be placed on the agenda for the EA meeting in March, April, and
So would the motion be then that the board chair send a letter to the EA director? Then it's clear.
Oh, sure, I don't have
Okay,
a problem.
communicate. Okay, thank you.
And I second that.
Second for that? Okay, thanks, Director. It is a much more proactive approach. So discussion on that suggestion, recommendation?
I just clarify in terms of the request that went to staff for a briefing note. I believe that the staff report provides the context. And I'll just ask if staff could provide any additional notes based on the conversation, and then I will send that to Jerry Lynn. Does that work? Thank you.
Okay, so motion that board chair send letter to Geraldine EA EBCM rep. Form agenda. Okay, so agenda. Further conversation, discussion?
Just clarification so that it gets on the agenda for.
Yeah, I'll have to see what Christine's captured, but yeah, the board chair will be sending a letter to the EA UBCM representative, replacing this as a topic on the electoral area forum agenda in February. Find some better words. All in favor? Opposed? We have one other item prior to public time. Director Newell moves that recommendation to the board, stipend expenses be paid for the rural planning workshop December 3rd. Do we have a second? Vandenberg, discussion? See none, all in favor? Well, we're past discussion.
Well, I just looked up the A forum agenda and it's community building fund.
Oh, let's
on
wait,
there.
we're in the middle of a vote.
Oh, I thought you just did the vote. My
No, I'm just gonna call for any opposed.
bad. I'm sorry.
Any opposed? Okay, so 10-3 is carried, goes to board tomorrow. Chair Watson, on process or where are we at here?
Completely inappropriate is where I'm at. Not completely. But I thought I'd look up the agenda to see if they'd already said it, and the Canada Community Building Fund, which is Community Works, is on the agenda. So I think we don't need to advocate for it, but we can certainly send the report and our additional concerns as context to the discussion.
Our notes.
Yeah.
Item 11, public time. Now, we were joined, I should check and see if you're still there. We have two public and observers, so going to chat, something you want to chat?
Let's send no questions. Thank you.
So one of the public entities online, no questions. Any other questions from the public? As I say, I see another public entity observer. So for the first time, any questions of this committee? Asking again, any questions? So, yep, hearing none. Public time was at 12:38.5, 12:39, no questions. 11, I keep looking at my computer.
This side of the lake.
Entertain a motion to adjourn. Without objection, we are adjourned. Thanks very much. Pretty good use of 3 hours again, most of 3 hours. Thanks, everybody.
Before I forget, that had my.
I